Good morning, everybody. So I'm very happy to have you all here today on our second edition of the CyberDay conference. And I hope you will enjoy this very small conference in this morning. And I hope there will be a lot of topics that will be of interest to you. So now it's a pleasure for me to introduce our director from the RESTENA Foundation, who will give a short welcome speech. Gilles Masson, please, the stage is yours.
I'd like to welcome you all to the second edition of the CyberDay.lu conference. It is really a great pleasure and also a bit of pride to see the collaboration of university and RESTENA paying off so well. And it's really a great pleasure to see the great topics that we have here and that are hopefully interesting to our community. And that's you all, the people active in education and research, either on the giving or on the receiving end. Obviously, also welcome to all the guests that are neither education or research, but just interested. So I'd also like quickly to thank the organizing team, along with our partners from Be Secure, GovSat, and Security.lu for putting up a worthwhile program. And obviously, I'd like to thank you all for coming and picking this conference from the many that are happening during the Cybersecurity Week. Now, a couple of days ago, I attended a talk about values in the internet age. It was about upholding freedoms, essentially. Freedoms like right to expression, obviously, right to education. Freedoms like equality, including the right of not being harassed for being yourself. Freedoms like upholding the rule of law. It was an inspiring reminder for the need to bring our values, our core values, to our interaction with and on the internet, professionally or in private. And now why I'm telling you this? Because I believe that cybersecurity is a key element for upholding our values. The effects of cybersecurity have grown dramatically beyond the annoying ransomware, beyond the everlasting spam for Viagra. I mean, still happening, but, well, these are no longer the core points of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, or the lack of it, has now a part in shaping the fundamentals of our society. When Sandrine Munoz will speak to you about data protection laws, do look beyond the seriously annoying cookie pop-ups, please. Look also beyond the obvious positive side effects, which are that your data is now yours and is being protected by law. Rather think about how GDPR makes it harder for your social networks to sell your identity, to sell your behavior, even your feelings, to the next marketeer or political party. Later on, when you learn about disinformation or fake news, there is more about it than the tools and techniques for manipulation. Please take a moment and reflect on how you, personally, are influenced by your usual information channels. Is it the news source you're watching that is giving you information, or is it pushing you into a direction for their own profit? Are you able, or at least trying, to tell fact from opinion, from outright lies? Obviously, I could go on a long time with this, but I would like to leave you with a thought, or rather a plea. A lot of you here are part of the first generation of digital natives. You are the first generation to have grown up with the internet and especially its social impact. You are the generation that is as much shaped by the internet as you are shaping it. You have, in my view, a large responsibility in making the internet a tool that upholds your values by keeping control and not being controlled. And therefore, I sincerely hope that this conference, by making you aware of digital threats and threats in the digital world, so that this conference does not only contribute to your safety online, but also helps you in being the citizens that you would like to be. With this, please enjoy the conference.
So therefore, I would like to introduce Sandrine Munoz from the University of Luxembourg, who will speak to us about the GDPR and also the fines that can occur if you apply inappropriate security measures and what can happen when you leak privacy issues or personal data. So welcome, Sandrine Munoz.
I would say that I'm very happy as a lawyer to do a presentation at CyberDay because I think that that will be my challenge and also my concern to show you the link between the cybersecurity and the GDPR. So for the one that don't know precisely what is a data protection officer, it's, to summarize, it's the legal advisor about the GDPR compliancy. Okay, so I tried to find, because I didn't find really funny videos about the GDPR. I know that there is a lot of things on internet, but I tried to find an image to illustrate the link between cybersecurity and the GDPR. So today I would like to give an overview of the recent fine imposed by the Data Protection Authority in case of breach of the GDPR, where there is a breach of the security measure, because there is specific provision about security in the GDPR. And I will give you also, I will also give some words about the recent report of the CNPD, that is the Data Protection Authority in Luxembourg, about personal data breach. And I will also explain you what is a personal data breach. And I think that to conclude, I would like to give some lesson that we can learn about this report and about the recent fine imposed by the Data Protection Authority. So, in terms of fine imposed by Data Protection Authority, so to give you the big picture, now with the GDPR, we are in a situation where the institution that process personal data in the activities. For example, at the university, we process a lot of personal data of students, of employees, of participants to the research projects, and we have to document this compliancy. And the CNPD is here to give guidance and also has also the right to do audits. And the Data Protection Authority, if an institution that processes personal data breach the GDPR, they can also impose fines. And for more than 1 year now, we saw that the Data Protection Authority in Europe already imposed some fines in relation with the breach of the security measure. So to give you some example, we had a famous example, I would say, last year in July, in an hospital in Portugal by the Data Protection Authority in Portugal, because they were the kind of data for sure were the patient data, and they were in restricted access to this patient data and a deficient what we call profile management, because they were around more than 900 profiles in this hospital, and that matched to less than 300 people. And there were also, that is a PT for an hospital, and then restricted access to the patient file. So the conclusion of the supervisory authority was that the hospital did not implement what we call the appropriate technical and organizational measure to protect the patient data. So in such case, you can clearly see that is a problem of security measure, not a problem of information of patients or other legal aspects. More recently, there were also a fine imposed in July to an hospital, this time in Netherlands, for GDPR breach. That is quite similar cases, because that is the question of medical records of the TV celebrity that were not adequately protected. And the access to this patient file was possible by 200 members of this hospital. So we can conclude that the medical records were not really well protected, and that is the same problem of unrestricted access. More recently, this year, we also saw a fine imposed in September. In this case, it's not to an hospital, but it's to a company in Poland. Same cases for insufficient organizational and technical safeguards. In the GDPR, that is the legal terms. We speak about organizational and technical safeguards. So in this case, they face a very high amount of fine, because it's 2 million euros. And it was because of unauthorized access to personal data of more than 2 million of people. So what kind of personal data were concerned there? They were not sensitive data like health data, but they were regular personal data like contact details, and also financial data that is not qualified as a sensitive data in the GDPR, but that is a sensitive, that is quite considered as a sensitive data by the Data Protection Authority. So that is also another case of the breach of the GDPR. And the interesting thing is the legal base of this breach, because that is the article about the security of processing, that is Article 32. So you can see the link between the word of the security and the GDPR. And also they add another breach, that is the principle of confidentiality, because when you process personal data, you have the responsibility to secure the personal data. So why they impose these fines? Because they also conclude to a lack of appropriate technical and organizational measure. They also say that is also interesting for you in terms of security, that is an unsuccessful measure for data authentication. And I think that if you already know a bit about security, you know that most of the time the double factor of authentication is recommended. And they also conclude that the staff of this company did not monitor the potential risk to have access to this data. So I think that is very interesting cases in terms of cybersecurity and GDPR. And hopefully there were also mitigation circumstances considered by the authority, even if the fine was quite high, because the company take action to mitigate the risk and to put the end to this breach. And they also lead a good cooperation with the authorities. And they were not already pursued for this kind of infringement. To finish this overview of the fine imposed for the breach of the GDPR in terms of security, we'll also examine the case in France. Because in France, there is also very strong data protection authority that is called the CNIL, and they impose several fines to companies because of lack of security measure too. I took the case of an insurance company because I think that the context is quite interesting, because the problem of the security was raised by a customer. So I get that the customer contacted the Data Protection Authority, and the Protection Authority contacted the company to remediate to this lack of security measure. The company implemented the measure, but apparently it was not enough. So the CNIL performed an audit to check if they properly implement this security measure, and they imposed a fine because there were also, in this case, a lack of proper access rights. That can be obvious, but that is the case. The password of the user was not strong enough, and the password of user were transmitted not through a secure way. So I came to the conclusion, I came to some conclusion about this different fine imposed by Data Protection Authority. And I think that it's quite easy to improve the security in such cases, because I would advise to be careful about the access rights, especially when there is processing of sensitive data. If you process, for example, in your activities or in your research project, health data, genetic data, political opinion, data of minors, I think you have to think more about the security measure. So I think that it's quite easy, but I will remind this principle that do not allow an unrestricted access to the personal data in your institution, and also pay attention to the profile of the users. Check if the profile are adapted. We saw the case of the hospital in Portugal, where they have 3 times more profile than staff. I will also say what I said before, that to adapt the security measure to the kind of data. For example, if you process personal data of minors, if you conduct research in schools, or if you process political opinion. I already saw some research projects at the university where they process data, political opinion, because there is also interesting now with the new tool that is also interesting to match the opinion of the people, the political opinion, to the candidate that present to some election. There were also an European project about this matching between the political opinion of user through an apps and the candidate at European election. I will also say to pay attention to the authentication system. We already, and to monitor the risk, to have access to the system. We already discussed with the CNPD some cases where they ask to have a double authentication system. And also, if through your legal department or through your DPO, if you are contacted by a data protection authority, it's really necessary to act promptly to improve the security measure and to not underestimate it. We saw that for the insurance company in France, because they say, okay, we implement the good security measure, and the commission came and it was not the case, and they imposed a fine. So, to remind you the legal framework, there are several articles, but I will not annoy you about all these details of these articles of the GDPR, but to keep in mind that there is specific obligation in the GDPR in relation to security of personal data. That is a principle when you process personal data, that you protect the data, you and your institution. And there is a specific article in the GDPR that is the 32 about security of processing. So the GDPR reinforces the obligation, the duty of security of the institution that process personal data. That is the case when you process personal data because you decide to do so, like when the university leads a research project, or when, for example, the university, because we have some research center that propose some platform for other institutions, and they are like a subcontractor, there is also a duty to secure the data. And this article is interesting because they explain which kind of risk we speak about. We speak about the risk for the person you process personal data, not the risk for the institution. That is new in comparison of the world of security, where before we spoke about the security of the institution. In the DPR, we speak about the security for the individual, for the rights. What will be the problem, the issue, if there is unauthorized access to the data of a person? What will be the risk for this person? We had the case, for example, if there is a laptop stolen and a potential access to identity card, for example, there is a risk for the person of the theft of the identity and the misuse of this ID card, okay? And hopefully this article also have criteria. So it's necessary when there is a decision to take about the security measure to take into account the state of the art, what are the technology for security developed right now, and the cost for this measure, and also the specificity of the processing. Okay, after this overview of the legal framework, some words about this new concept and new obligation into GDPR that is called the personal data breach. That is an incident having, an IT incident having an impact on personal data. Because I think in my daily activity, I also encounter some cases of personal data breach. So I think that is important to draw your attention of what is it, this famous personal data breach. So there is 3 elements in the GDPR about the personal data breach. So that is a breach of security that leading to an accidental or unlawful destruction, loss, and so on access. That means that if you have an IT security incident in terms of availability, you process personal data and you lost the data and you don't have a backup, that could be a personal data breach. There is also the problem of integrity if you have the misuse of the data, or most of the time that is a problem of confidentiality. The data were not very well protected and someone had access to this data. So these 3 elements, and that is the link between the breach of security and this accidental access, destruction, or misuse of data. So I gave you some example. There were also the example of the email sent to the wrong person. It depends on what email was sent, but sometimes that can be quite tricky. For example, if the wrong information is sent to a big mailing list, because now there is also generic email address and you have 100 persons behind this address. And I would say that not all security incidents are personal data breach, but all personal data breach are security incidents. That is that you have to keep in mind. So now you would say, why implementing good security measure? It's first of all to prevent to face to this personal data breach, because you have duties regarding the GDPR. Sometimes we have to notify to the Data Protection Authority. Sometimes, depending on the risk, we have also to communicate to the person the data were unauthorized, disclosed illegally. It's also to mitigate the consequences of personal data breach. When there is an access to personal data, there is also possibilities to take fastly the good security measure to stop this breach, and also to prevent fine imposed by the Data Protection Authority, as I saw you before. And so you have consequences in terms of legal and cost, but you have also all the consequences in terms of reputation. Because when there were a security incident, especially now, because we are more than 1 year after the entry into force of the GDPR, and I don't know if you already saw the news, but we have still a lot of actualities, a lot of news in relation with the GDPR. So where there is a security incident with personal data involved, there is also a risk for the reputation of the institution and the cost associated. So, to quite finish, before the lesson learned, I would like also to give you some statistic from the CNPD, that is the Data Protection Authority, from the breaches last year for the personal data breach. So we saw that there is quite a high amount of notification of personal data breach sent to the CNPD compared to the size of the country, because that is for more than 6 months, there is 172 personal data breaches notified to the CNPD. So what is interesting, and you can find more information in the link there. So that is interesting to see the major sources of this personal data breach. So I would say that in the security world, we speak about the human factor, because most of the time in 57 cases, it's a non-malicious internal act. And in 27 cases, it's an external malicious act. So that is clearly a human action. So what are the most frequent causes of this personal data breach? That is the personal data that are sent to the wrong person, also hacking, involuntary publication of personal data, and I would say also the loss of or a stole of device. One of the classical one is that when you have your laptop and your laptop is stolen or lost. And there is also at the end of this list the phishing. If the people click on the link and give their credential, that is also personal data breach with some consequences. It depends to what the person, the hacker, has access. So why there were this personal data breach? Because the procedures are not followed, because some security rules are bypassed, and I think also because the people are not very aware of the confidentiality rules and on the consequences. And sometimes that is also a lack of attention. When you want to send an information, for example, about you want to recruit someone and you send the COV of this person to too many people, for example. And there is also the financial motivation of the hackers in 25%. Because if the hacker wants to hack you, it's because, or to have access to the data, it's because they want to recover money. So most of the time, that is a confidentiality impact. So it's really necessary to raise awareness. So I hope that after this talk, you will have a better idea of what is a personal data breach. So to quickly finish about the lesson learned about this report of the CNPD about the personal data breach, the fine imposed by the Data Protection Authority, I would say that please think about organizational and security measures to protect personal data. And if you have some doubts or if you need some advice, consult your ID department, your Chief Information Security Officer, and your DPO. And also pay attention with who do you share personal data, why do you share this personal data, and share this personal data through a secure way. Email is not a secure way, except if your email is encrypted or the file attached is encrypted. And also consider the anonymization, pseudonymization, and encryption techniques. So, last slide about the lesson learned also in terms of personal data breach. So in case you have, for example, your laptop stolen and you send the email to the wrong mailing list, do not panic and react promptly. Don't hide this and contact your DPO or the person in charge of the personal data breach and follow carefully the instruction, because as soon we react, as soon we can mitigate the risk, okay? And also try to be quite specific about what happens, what data are concerned, and what person are concerned. And also, please correct your behavior for the next time to prevent you have the same kind of incident. Thank you for your attention. So I hope that I did not annoy you too much with this legal stuff. But I think that is important also to make the connection and not to have separate worlds.
Thank you, Sandrine. To another topic. Who of you likes sea turtles? Raise your hands, please. Oh, there are quite a few. So I will not now start speaking about biology, but I will leave the floor to Guillaume Jean Herbier from the RESTENA Foundation, who will talk about sea turtles can bite, so protect your jewels while surfing. So what will this mean? He will speak about domain hijacking, hijacking attacks on the DNS. Guillaume, the floor is yours.
Hello and welcome everyone. Do you hear me well? Yes? Okay, so I'm Guillaume Herbier. I'm working with the RESTENA Foundation. So our job is to provide network to the higher education and research community. And we're also the registry for .lu, meaning that we're responsible for the registration and the availability of all domain names that end in .lu. So cybersecurity could, well, be approached as how can we stay safe and secure while using the internet, which raises the question, which internet are we talking about? If we ask millennial or maybe the younger people among the audience, maybe the view of the internet is more like this, like a set of independent apps in which they can share the social life, interact with friends. If you ask somebody a little bit older, like I am, the internet, or at least what's called the web, looks like this, or at least brings this to mind, typing URLs in the browser bar. Should it be only the Google domain name or your favorite magazine? But if you look, well, to the technical aspect of it, we should all agree that the internet is more like this. So it's a set of routers and computers that are interconnected. And those devices use what is called a IP address as a technical identifier to be uniquely identified by the network, being a legacy v4 or the current v6 form of those IP addresses. But they are like phone numbers, and who really remembers a phone number today? We all have phone books on our phones and other devices for that. So it's much more convenient for humans to deal with domain names. And they're like the phone book of the internet. And it's easier to remember, it's better suited for the usage of humans, but it's also convenient because it offers a level of indirection over IP addresses. And this level of indirection is used quite a lot, especially by content delivery network to, route you, have you access to the closest resources from where you are physically, so you get good response time and your Netflix or YouTube video loads quite fast. And the DNS, or the domain name system, is like making the bridge between the two by allowing you to resolve an IP address, or domain name to an IP address, or to do the reverse matching from an IP address to a domain. So this is one of the view you can have for that the DNS is kind of what transformed the network of machines that I've talked about into what could be called the internet made for humans. With that being said, let's take a look about the DNS landscape. So pay attention to the slide, not only because I will be using it quite a lot in the rest of the presentation, but also because after viewing this, you will know more about DNS that 90 or 95% of the people on this planet. So I think this could be valuable. So the problem I'm trying to solve here is somebody launching a browser on its operating system and wanting to display a web page at www.domain.lu. Of course, the human has typed a domain name, but what the system wants, what's required to display this, is to somehow get the IP address of this website. So on the operating system, there's what is called a stub resolver, which function is really just to start the query. So what's the IP address for 3w.domain.lu? And basically, the stub resolver just asks a question, expects from the reply to come. And to do this, he has to talk to what is called a recursive resolver, which will actually fetch the reply for that. And most of the time, this recursive resolver is provided and configured by your ISP, so when you connect yourself to your home network with the default settings, or when you connect your laptop to the network of your institution or your company, you will not only get an IP address for your device, but you will also have a list of recursive resolvers to connect to or to contact. But you could also choose to configure yourself to talk to your system to talk to a public resolver. Those have used the one from Google, so the 8.8.8.8, or more recently, services provided by Cloudflare, for instance, with 1.1.1. There's also 9.9.9.9, and I don't think the other is too complicated for me to remember like this. But most of the time, still, for the default settings of what's used by most of the people is what's come with their internet connection. So what does this recursive resolver do? To get the information, the actual information, it will have to contact a set of authoritative servers, those who have the information. And by starting this resolver, it only knows about what are called the root servers of the DNS. So it will contact one of those. But those servers don't have a clue about what's the IP for www.domain.lu. What they only know is the list of authoritative servers for .lu. So they will reply that, and the resolver asks the same question: what's the IP of www.domain.lu to one of the authoritative servers of .lu? This one doesn't have a clue about www.domain.lu, but knows the authoritative servers of domain.lu. And so, still going on this recursion, the resolver will ask the authoritative servers for domain.lu, which finally have the information, either in IPv4 if you live in the past, or IPv6 if you want to live in the current world. And so finally having this answer, the resolver will reply to the stub resolver, which finally will make that available to get information to contact the requested website. And this recursive resolution takes between 1 to 100 milliseconds, and can happen between 10 to 100 times when you're trying to load a page. The worst case being news pages with a lot of photos, fonts, ads, and stuff. But that's only one side of it. That's how we can get access to the content of a domain once it exists. But there's also the how do we make this domain exist? And that's the provisioning part. Oops. Okay, so with that, we got somebody who's called a registrant, which is the person who will want to get the domain name, and to do so, it will contact another party, which is called the registrar, which is basically a company that sells domain names, not only for .lu, but for a lot of other TLDs. So the TLDs are the .com, .net, .de, .fr, and all the rest. And basically, when registering a domain, the most important information you have to provide is who you are, so we can register that the domain belongs to somebody, and the list of the authoritative name servers you want for this domain. The registrar will then talk to a registry, which will centralize all the registrations for a TLD, and who also provides the service of those authoritative servers. This is basically what we do. DNS.lu, so this part of RESTENA, which is operating.lu. But there's also a third actor that is involved in this. It's the DNS provider. So you have to find someone to provide you those authoritative name servers for your domains. So most of the time, the DNS provider can be either the web agency you've contacted to make your website, for instance, if they offer the service. It can be your registrar, who also can act as a DNS provider, or it can be somebody who's just doing that. Like, for instance, Cloudflare is doing it, is their core business. So, okay, ready to go? So with all those actors and all those servers, all those entities, well, the question should not that much be what could possibly go wrong, but more likely what will certainly go wrong. And we will see now a list of recent examples of what went wrong in the real world. The first and the easiest thing, and maybe the thing you're facing most of the time could be what is called the lying resolver. So everything is fine, but when you ask a question, so instead of replying, for instance, 192.0.2.80 for the IPv4 address of www.domain.lu, the recursive resolver is configured to reply you with another IP address. And then, of course, because, well, you tend to trust this resolver, instead of going to the actual website you wanted to visit, you will go to somewhere else. Why is that, and who's doing this? Well, most of the time it's either your ISP or, well, your corporate network is doing it. Or the public resolver can do it as well. But what are the reasons behind this? Some could be considered legitimate, like ad blocking or providing you security by using the DNS as a firewall. So basically, I can sell you a service as a public resolver provider that I will not show you ads because I will just black hole every domain related to advertising on the internet. Or I could protect you from getting malware or ransomware just because I will black hole the domains that I think are related to such illegal and dangerous activities. This could also be for traffic optimization. I've talked about the content delivery networks. So basically the idea is I will reply you with the IP address of the closest server to you, so you have better performance. There could be some commercial interests, or it can be enforced by legislation. For instance, in France, all gambling sites which are not registered with the national authority are blackballed this way, and this is by law. Or it can also be by censorship. So if I'm an authoritarian government and I don't want you to use Twitter for a while, I can just use and tell all my national ISPs to blackhole twitter.com, for instance. Another type of attack that could be laid on this architecture is a distributed denial of service. Basically, the idea is to attack one of the weakest link of the authoritative servers, so the one which is closest to the domains, just to take it down. So the recursive resolver could not have its reply, and there's finally no way to access the website. And this is exactly what happened in October 2016. A lot of US-based company, most of them you should know just by the logo, were using and only using a very big DNS provider called DIN that now belongs to Oracle, and he was attacked. So all its authoritative servers, not all of them, most of its authoritative servers located in the US were not able to reply. So for a day or so, a very big site like Amazon or Twitter or Netflix and the like were hardly reachable just because of this attack. And the funniest thing, if you want to look at it a little bit deeper into it, is that DNS was attacked to create a denial of service. So basically, people asked tiny questions to open resolvers, pretending the request was coming from DIN servers, and all those servers received a lot of traffic in reply, which caused the distributed denial of service. Another thing that can happen is a lower below, let's say, DNS. It's about routing. So if one of the ISP is compromised and it starts to advertise better or more specific routes, so ways to go to one of the authoritative servers, then the traffic could be diverted to a malicious server that pretends to be the good one, but which in fact is a bad one, and will reply with whatever IP address interests the attackers. So here again, you will get a wrong reply, and you will be directed to a website you probably don't want to visit. That's what happened in April 2018 to a website called MyEtherWallet. So it's a Bitcoin wallet, so people log to this site with their credentials to make Bitcoin transfer. And basically one small ISP was compromised and started to announce very specific routes for Amazon Route 63, so the authoritative service provided by Amazon. And well, in a limited but still quite important region of the internet, Well, resolvers were not talking to the proper servers, and well, people logged into this fake My Other wallet and got the credentials stolen. But all attacks don't necessarily rely on technical aspects. You could attack things by the human side of it, just by doing some social engineering. For instance, if you manage to get the credentials of a registrant, you can simply log as himself to its registrar interface and change the values concerning the domain. So here, for instance, we will change, you could change the holder, but it's a little bit harder, but you could just change the list of alternative servers. So because it's at the registrar, it will get published up to the registry, and the registry, in good faith, because it's the information, it's the data it receives from the registrar, will just change the delegation, so the information it has at the .lu, for instance, level. And then all recursive resolver trying to resolve this domain will talk to ns1.bad.net, because it's the new record, it's the new server to contact. And this one is really likely to reply, again, false address. This is exactly what happened in 2013 to the New York Times that got hacked by the Syrian Electronic Army this way. And this is how the New York Times homepage looked for an hour or so, because before, well, this got caught and got resolved. So at this point, especially those who like the animal, were still wondering, where are the sea turtles? In fact, this is the name of an unprecedented DNS attack that started in January 2017. It lost magnitude recently, but it might still be ongoing, and it went unnoticed for more than a year and a half. So contrary to other attacks I've made where the idea was to be shown and to prove that, yes, you've succeeded in your attack, here the idea was really to stay still. And it's targeted public and private entity, especially related to governments, and government first in the Middle East and North Africa, and more recently in the first and second quarter of this year, European CCTLD. So .gr, the Greek CCTLD was infected by that, was concerned with this hijack. And what are the objectives? So, well, first, hijack the domains, but that's just like a means to do what's coming next. The idea is to set a proxy. So basically, before talking to the website you want to visit, you will talk to another website in the middle in order to collect as much data as possible and passwords to get access to other data. So if we come back to the diagram we've learned to like in the past few minutes, how did CTurtle operate? It used various set of methods to initiate the attack. One of them being network vulnerabilities. So mainly zero-day breaches in routers. It also used a campaign of malware, a campaign of mail phishing, and some social engineering. And they not only attacked or tried to compromise the registrants themselves, so the end users, but they also attempted to compromise and succeeded in compromising registrars, and as I've explained with the .gr example, registries. The idea is still the same. Somehow try to publish wrong records at the CCTLD level, so that recursive resolver will, for attacked or compromised domain, will go to an evil authoritative server and will get wrong answer and be redirected to the wrong domain. But they took it a little bit further. They even managed to get an SSL or TLS certificate for HTTPS. I will explain just later how this was done. And they set up their proxy, and so you really could notice that maybe a little more latency, but beyond that, not much, if you didn't pay close attention. And they were able to collect a lot of data about victims. So I was talking about HTTPS, and many of you said, oh, but we've got this, this HTTPS thing, when we put the S before that, we got this little lock, green, it said secure, so, well, not that much. In fact, the trust model for HTTPS, in fact, the model for X509, which is the name of the technology which is used to generate the certificates for using HTTPS. The trust model is kind of broken. All the trust in there is based on what I call root certificate authorities. And there are literally hundreds of them. I've counted on my macOS device, it's like 180 that are trusted. And some of those entities, they pertain to military or governmental agencies, like there are some related to China, to the Turkish army, for instance. So you can start to guess what they can use that for. And the idea in the X509 world is that any certificate authority can generate a certificate for any domain. So if I know to generate the certificates, I can generate a HTTPS certificate for google.com if I want. It won't be trusted because my root certificate is not in this trusted list of authorities that are either in the system for Windows, macOS, or either in the browser for Mozilla. But anyway, so it means that anybody can generate a certificate. So maybe the system is as weak as the weakest certificate authority. And there are many, many links in there. So in 2004, the Electronic Frontier Foundation tried to study how they correlate and well, all they are linked together. So just to know that it's a mess. Untrusted CA store, so the list of CAs you have in your system can also be hacked. For instance, if your computer is registered to an Active Directory domain, so Windows computer, then your system administrator can add and remove trusted root authority as he wants. And this is often used to set up corporate proxies. So even if you're using HTTPS at work, well, your employer can see what's encrypted inside and can block it based on the content. One of the other things interesting is we now have this Let's Encrypt stuff about to generate certificates. So the idea was to introduce the free and automated way to generate the certificates. And it's so popular and so easy that it really had a lot of momentum and it quickly dominated the market. The problem is that it relies on a verification based on the domain name. And we've seen that it's quite easy, relatively easy if you want to hijack this domain and have that redirected to a web server. So Let's Encrypt is a free and automated certificate generation protocol, even for compromised domains. And the other thing that is important to note with the fact that they dominate the market is like this screams for single point of failure. So the day Let's Encrypt has an issue, a security problem, then a lot of certificates will become less trusted, let's say. And the fact that this has gained a lot of audience, quickly deprecated what are called IV certificates, like reinforced SSL certificates, where there's a lot of paperwork to really prove that you are the authority. For instance, if you go, I don't know, to pause.lu, to paypal.com, you also see that there's the name of the company that this is displayed in the browser bar. Maybe it's not there anymore, but it used to be. And those correspond to those harder to get certificates. Just a sentence to meditate. This was said by the security specialist Bruce Schneier after the Snowden revelation, is that encryption itself works. I mean, TLS, so the way to build the protected tunnel when you do HTTPS, this works. Even TLS 1.3, there are parts that were mathematically proven. But what's weak is the endpoints. So myself, have I been compromised? And the other hand, and this is where the problem lies. So can DNS, and especially DNSSEC, I will introduce that a little bit, can save the day. DNS can help mitigate some of the weaknesses by publishing some records into the DNS. But to do that, we need a chain of trust, and this is DNSSEC. And the idea is that Starting from your domain, you will sign things, publish a key to the upper level, which is signed as well, which publish a key to the upper level. And the upmost level, the root, is signed as well, and the key for the root is well known. So compared to X509, there's only one source of trust. And the other thing that we need is somebody to validate that, and this is the recursive resolver that has to do the validation and ensure that nobody is tampered with the results. So now if I turn back to you, how you can protect the jewels, being your online assets, your domain names, or whatever data you will send on the internet. Well, this mostly has to do with DNS, but something that are in your hands. Be aware that DNS exists and it has its flaws, which is probably the aim of this talk today. Please do the usual suspects, so have some password hygiene, has two-factor authentication wherever it's possible, pay attention to phishing and blah, blah, blah. Important as well, you have the choice. You have the choice for the DNS provider, you have the choice for the registrar you will use, you have the choice of the CCTLD you will use. Think of cool versus serious, like .io, .whatever, it may be trendy, but is it really secure? Do you have trust in these guys? And if you want, you can even try and verify by yourself that some DNSSEC domains are secure. There are some online tools or even a Firefox extension to do so. And there's also what you should demand to the different actors of the DNS scene. So from your registrar, ask them to have decent security. Ask them to provide you two-factor authentication to authenticate to their control platform. Ask them to support DNSSEC. From your provider, yes, ask them to sign your zone if possible. And from your registry, ask them to provide DNSSEC, or even better, a way to lock the information in your domain unless you really want them to change. And from your ISP, try to get a non-lying resolver and a validating one, at least. For the record, registry lock is planned, I'll tell you, for next year. We've been offering DNSSEC for almost a decade now, so everything's there. In Luxembourg, thanks to the ISPs, there's a lot of validation can occur. So if you're using the main ISPs in Luxembourg, they already do DNSSEC validation. The only thing that remains is that the number of DNSSEC secure domains are pretty low, only 2%, which is really, really nothing. We're at the real bottom of this curve, this charts with the good students being .se and stuff. That's really need to gain momentum into that. And as a registry for anything, any question related to that, we are here to help. So, in conclusion, just don't be fooled and mind the bytes, because those nice sea turtles may look nice, but they do really bite, as this guy experienced. Thanks a lot.
Welcome to our next speaker, who is Michael Hamm from Circle. So the Circle who is responsible for the economic sector here in Luxembourg. And he will do something more practical to wake you all up here in the room. He will speak about forensics and incident response. Michael, the floor is yours.
So hello, I'm Michael, I'm from Circle. And today I will give a very short and quick introduction into incident response and forensics. And then I will move to the second part of the presentation. I prepare some exercises. And for these exercises, I need your input. Yes, I need your support. I will ask you some questions, and you have to give me some ideas, because I cannot solve it on my own. So let's come to the introduction. So very often I get asked, what the heck is a CERT? Yes. And to answer this question, good, I like to go back to 1988. 1988, something happens. Who have an idea what happens? Who was alive at this point? So I'm exactly, Gilles. It was in the news. It was something which is called the Morris worm. And so what happened? At this time, the internet was very small. Yes, it was mainly on the universities and mainly in the USA. And some guy called Robert Tappan Morris, he had the idea to make a small application which is weaponized with the list of most common used passwords and some exploit for vulnerabilities in finger and sendmail daemons. And he used this small application to get access to all the servers in the internet. That was his idea. His intention was he liked to measure the size of the internet. But he had a small problem in his application. Yes, there was a little bug. What happened was the worm infected each machine over and over and over again. It ends up with the system getting overloaded and stop working, which result in a totally denial of service. So the internet goes down, basically. Now, as the next step, the system administrators start to mitigate the problem. Yes, they analyze the worm, they figure out the vulnerabilities, and they like to exchange information, but it was all a big mess because you have to find the point of contact of this university, the point of contact of the other university. You have to publish your information somewhere, and other people have to find the place where can I find the information, how to mitigate the problem. So all in all, it was very chaotically and don't work very good. And as the lesson learned, the Carnegie Mellon University set up some kind of a coordination center, which is there to coordinate in case of an incident, the response. Yes. So you have a single point of contact where you can send your information, you discover, and you have a single point where you get your information to have a coordinated incident response capabilities. Today in Luxembourg, the CERT landscape is quite rich. Yes, we have many public certs, like for example for the governmental, we have the GovCert. For the education and research networks, we have RESTENA C-Cert, and we have Circle for the private networks. And we have many, during the while, we have many commercial companies providing CERT capabilities. So we are for the private sector, yes, for the communes and all non-governmental entity responsible, and we don't pop up out of the box and say, hey, we are Circle, we are the CERT. No, we get the mandate from the government. So we are official, the CERT for the private sector. And as a CERT for the private sector, we do the incident response, we do proactive security, and we develop tools and services to support this activity. And I just can tell you, please take a look at our website for services and tools. Most of them are useful maybe for you and are for free at all. For the kind of proactive security, I like to show you one example. Yes, you have paste sites where hackers love to paste information. For example, they love to paste lists of vulnerable websites. And we monitor these websites, and whenever something pops up in Luxembourg, for example, you see here, I make a small anonymization of the name. We see a Luxembourg website post up in a list of SQLi vulnerable websites. We can contact the webmaster and warn him so that he can fix the security of his site. Sometimes webmasters don't fix the security of the site, and then some weeks later you have another posting from attackers which post all the user database with the login credentials on Pastebin. So sometimes we find .lu user accounts with email address and password, and we can notify the victims that they should change their password everywhere because it's now publicly known. Another example I like to show is you all know those extortion scams. Yes, I know your password. As you get an email, I know your password. I compromise your router, or I compromise your webmail account because I sent the email from your email address. When we see starting this campaign last year in the summer, we immediately publish a report where we explain the situation so that people can learn what's going on and don't pay the ransom. So, and we provide very much possibilities to get in contact with us. Yes, you can call the hotline. You can send an email to our ticketing system. You can send an encrypted email by using PGP, or you can use an anonymous form. Sometimes this is used. People don't like to disclose their identity, then they anonymously submit an incident report to us. So some statistics, we start getting operational in 2010, and these are some statistics about incidents per year. So if we receive an incident report, very often we have to do some analysis, yes? What has happened? Yes, and there are some disciplines of forensic analysis. You have the classical post-mortem analysis, which means somebody bring you a disk, or today also some SSD drives, and you have to figure out what had happened on the system. Sometimes you receive a memory dump from a running system, yes, then you can analyze who was logged in, which processes are running, do we have open network connections, which files are opened, do we have remote access, and stuff like this. You have the classical network forensics, where you analyze PCAP captures, network traffic, or, for example, log files from firewalls or web servers, and NetFlow data. You have a reverse engineering. This means you get, for example, you get a piece of malware, and you have to find out what does this malware do. Yes, or you get an infected Office document, which is infected with Visual Basic. The Visual Basic is deobfuscated, makes it more hard to analyze it, and you have to figure out, okay, which IP addresses get accessed, and which payload get downloaded from the scripts. You have the new disciplines, mobile forensics, where we have to analyze the iPhones or iPads and the Android devices. And you have something very new, which is the cloud forensics. We get more and more involved in incidents where Outlook mail accounts are involved, or Office 365 cloud documents and stuff like this. So that's so far for the introduction. Now we came to our first exercise, yes. Let's assume we all are admins in a small company, or let's say in a bank, yes, that's nice. We all are Windows guys, yes, our servers are Windows, our users use Windows client PCs. We have a Windows PC, we are the admin, and somebody like to leave the bank or the company with this USB stick, yes. And the guy, let him call Shady Michael. So you say to the guy, okay, Shady Michael, let me see what is on the USB stick. Do you like to exfiltrate some data? So Shady Michael gives you the USB stick. You connected it to your PC. Voila, it's recognized. We open it, and we see we have two files on this USB stick. Yes, it's a small USB stick. It's recognized as device H. It's 256 megabyte. The partition. So now we like to see what can I do? I like to see if somebody exfiltrate data. So first step. Somebody have an idea?
The data is small enough, just put it in the MSP table and mark it as delete.
Yes, yes. Marked it as delete, okay. That's already very complicated. Seriously, this is a more easy exercise. So what about just open the files? Huh? Let's open the files and check what's inside. So what do we have here? We have a small text document. It's not really big. Yes, it's just some bytes. And there's written, dear admin, I really do not try to exfiltrate some data, honestly. Okay, let's open the other text file, the hello world. This is also a very small text file. Yes, hello world. There is not much. Let's look at the properties. So, okay, this file is 210 bytes. This byte is 95 bytes. what can we do with our Windows system to identify if there is a data exfiltration going on? Show hidden files. Who said that? Ah, yes. Good. Show hidden files, and there's a second option, isn't it? Show the STIB files or something like this. But maybe you must help me. I'm not very good in, not very used to use Windows. Maybe it takes some time for me to find it. It's maybe in the properties. No. What? Somebody knows where I can activate this feature, show hidden files? Folder search option. Okay. Folder and search options. Okay. Ah, yeah, great. Thank you. Hide protected operating system files. Okay. We will not unhide operating system files. Yes. Hide empty devices. No. Show hidden files. Here we have it. Okay. Apply. Okay, now we show hidden files and don't hide operating system files anymore. Nothing changed. What about the command line? Let's go to the file with the command line. It's on device H, and we make a dir. I'm not on H, okay. We see the same information. We see our two file names, and they are not very big. Nothing changed. Maybe we can call one of the file with the command line, notepad text .txt, for example. Yes. Thank you. A small typo. Well, there is our file. We don't like to exfiltrate data. So we can say the file is, the disk is clean, and we can give it to Shady Michael so that he can leave the company. But, moment, let's try this. What we have here. My hidden message. The fox is sleeping. So what happened? We have data on the disk which we cannot see with our Windows system. Let's take another test. I call MS Paint. Wow, we have a screenshot of the company's boss PC on our USB stick. That's funny, no? Somebody have an idea what is the trick? It's a feature of NTFS. Exactly, alternate data stream. So on NTFS, you have the possibility to save the data in a stream, a data stream, and you have the possibility to save data in an alternate data stream. And this data stream is not easily managed by Windows. Yes. Honestly, before Windows Vista, yeah?
Just a small question. How would this react on the Linux system? Are they visible or?
We can test this later because I use this speak during the whole presentation, so we can test. I think it's not visible. Okay, yes, you can store data in the data stream, or you can store data in the alternate data stream. And before Windows Vista, you don't have the possibility to see it on a Windows system without additional third-party software. Since Windows Vista, you have one option in the dir command which helps you see these data streams. It's the option /r. With /r, we can see now alternate data streams. And here you see the syntax of the alternate data streams, yes. It's the name of the file, double point, and name of the other file. So how did I create this data streams? Very simply, I type my data, which I like to exfiltrate from the file server. In the example, I type it into my alternate data stream file. And the same for the picture. I type it into the alternate data stream files. It's that simple. You can test it on your own system. It's not dangerous. Yes, you can play around with it and maybe scare your friends a little bit and stuff like this. It's a funny game, and this feature is very old. The idea of this feature is to support Apple file systems for NTFS. So it is implemented since 20 years, I don't know, but it's still very unknown, this feature. Okay, so now we don't need this Windows machine anymore. And we can kick out the USB stick, and then we can check on the Linux if we can see something. So where is the mount point? So LL, media, Michael. So this is what we see on Linux. We don't see it. No. Okay, now we come to our next exercise. So we saw a feature of NTFS. We can use it to hide our data. Yes, it was used early, many years before. It was used by virus to hide virus, for example. And it was used as a so-called anti-forensic technique for data exfiltration. Let's go to the next exercise. So we hide data in the NTFS partition. Now the next challenge is we like to hide data, but not in the NTFS partition, but in the not used area on the USB stick. So this USB stick, it's an 8 gigabyte USB stick. We see it have one partition of 256 megabytes. So there is a big amount of data not used in this USB stick. My question now, can we use these sectors on the stick to store our data there? So first thing I do is I investigate the USB stick a little bit more. So for example, I would like to list the partition table. Yes, I make this Windows a little bit more big. Fdisk -L. And I have to find out which device, DMS. So it's SDB. Yes, this is our USB stick device, SDB. So I can list the partition tables, Fdisk -L, def, SDB. So this is our listing of the partition table. We see some interesting information. Yes, the sector size is 512 bytes. This is normal, this is standards. The first sector on the stick is the master boot record. The main reason to have the master boot record is to store the partition table. Then we see the first partition starts at sector 2048. So we have sector 2048 where the partition starts, and then we have our 256 megabyte partition until this sector where the partition ends. So we have 2048 512 byte sectors before the partition starts, which are empty. We can look at them with a simple tool which is on each Linux system, yes, DD. We can read those sectors. So DD, I tell him to read from def SDB. We say the block size is 512. We count 2049 sectors, and we pipe those information to a hexadump tool and to our less tool. So what we have here, we have our USB stick, the sectors, the values of our USB stick, and here we have now exactly our master boot record. the first 512 bytes with our master boot record. And here is the partition table with one partition entry. And now everything else is empty, and we can jump to the last sector of our non-used area, which is empty. And then we have the first sector of the NTFS partition. And now my goal is to hide the data in this area between the first sector of the partition and the master boot record. So, somebody have an idea how to do it? Already? Oh, okay, I told you I need maybe 5 minutes more long. Okay, I will make it more quick because I already received a warning. There's just 5 minutes left. I use this same tool, DD, to write the data on the disk. Yes, I echo my secret message, pipe the output to DD, and say, write it on the device. In this case, it was dev SDA, and skip 100 sectors, and then write the data. And I try the same with an application. Yes, I take DD, again, to read the application DD as input, and write the application DD on the stick as output, and after sector 101. And now I can use the same techniques to read the data from, or access the data from the stick. So I take DD again, input file equals dev SDB, yes, block size equals 512, count equals 1, skip 100, and pipe the output to XXD, skip equals. And voila, there are my data on sector 100 on the not used area. So you can put this stick in any device you want, in any PC. Nobody will ever see this data if you don't know that they are there, and if you don't make forensic analysis to find them. But now what is our application? DD, we stored at sector 101. So let's take a look what is there. We have an ELF header, so we have a binary data there. Now can we write back this data to our stick, to our PC, to use it, the application? So let's again take DD, and here we see the binary is exactly 76,000 bytes. So we change the block size to 1. We count 76,000 bytes. We skip our 101 sectors, but now the sector size in this command is just 1, not 512. So we have to multiply with 512 and write the output to a file. File equals dddd.exe, for example. Well, now our dddd.exe example is there. Let's test this. We can use it. DDD. I have to make it executable. Change mod plus x dddd. And now I call my dddd, for example, with the option help. And it works. It runs. The application runs. So we recover back our application from the non-used area, from the non-used sectors to the disk, of the disk to our hard drive on the PC. And yes, that's also a nice topic. I prepare another exercise, the last one. You know, in forensics, you mount the USB stick read-only because you don't like to modify the evidences. And I have myself the challenge to modify data on the read-only mounted disk. But I think the time is out, and you believe me anyhow that I can do it? Or is somebody, okay, it's your choice, you have break. Do you like to spend your break here to see the demo, or do you like to go to the break? So nobody stands up, so I assume you like to see it. Okay, quick, I will make a quick demo. It takes 5 minutes or maybe 6. So we already see how our stick is mounted. Okay, it's our partition SDB1 is mounted as media Michael circle. So now I remount it in read-only mode. So mount -O, remount, read-only, def SDB1 to media Michael up. Voila. Now it should be mounted read-only. Let's review. Okay, here we see read-only. We can test. We can test, yes, hello world. Okay, here we have our small test text, and now I like to not just modify the data by accident, I like to make a targeted attack. I like to modify the data in this text and replace it with my own data, with a read-only mounted partition. Okay, let's do some test. What's first is, I first search the data on the disks. Where are the data? So I use the strings command, strings, and I like to see the offset in byte of def SDB1. And I'll search the strings for the output for the word world. Yes, I like to change the hello world. Strings minus strings, what is the error? Strings. Okay. So I have to take the look. Strings minus TD. Ah, okay. Decimal, not TB. Yeah. So now the strings tools goes over the disk and it finds our data at the offset 82,434 bytes. So I now where is the string on the stick? Yes. Now I like to know what is the sector. Which sector is it? So I calculate this number 82434 divided by 512. So it's sector 168. And now I use the simple dd command. If def SDB1 and write the sector 161.raw to my disk, count just one sector equals 1. So now we have the sector on our disk, this sector of the USB stick, 512 bytes. We cannot open it. It's a sector. It's not a text document. We cannot open it with a text editor. It will not work. But we can open it with a hex editor. Whoop. Here we have our sector. No, that's wrong. Now something goes wrong. Okay, I make an error. I copy the first sector from the USB stick, not the sector 161. So I have to skip 106 sectors to write the good sector to the disk. I make a small error. Now we have the sector on the disk. And now we have our exercise, our Hello World exercise on the disk. And I simply like to change something very quick and easy. For example, I like to change this in this string. Okay, that's all. And now the trick is to write the sector back on the disk. So I've used dd again. I take as input file my sector. I take it output file my device, def SDB1. I skip 161 sectors. There's a small typo. This should be enough, no? Now we should write back the sector to the disk, and I should see the modification. There's something going wrong. But maybe this exercise was so hot that the operating system don't realize that something changed. So let's eject the disk and connect it back. Up. Ah, now we connect to the shitty Windows. No. Okay, kick it out. And here we have it back again. And voila, our data changed successfully. Thank you very much.
Okay, so maybe we can then continue with our next speaker, who is Thierry Degling from GovCert, the governmental cert from Luxembourg, who will present us an end-to-end way of handling cybersecurity incidents. And without disclosing anything in front, the stage is yours, Rocket Man.
So today we're going to talk about the end-to-end chain of handling IT incidents. So I work for the Computer Emergency Response government. We are in charge of the government. We are also in charge of all the critical infrastructures of Luxembourg. And we do handle cyber incidents. So we do not handle any help desk issues. If people have problems with their laptop because Word is not working, that is not the business that we do. We only do cyber incidents. So today we're going to be limited to incidents that have happened or that are happening right now. So I'm not going to talk about stuff that can happen in the future because we cannot already handle that as an incident just now, because that would be proactive movement. But I'm going to teach you, like, how do we at GovCert think that we should handle those incidents. So what kind of security incidents do you know? This is not a security incident. It's a black screen. It's meant to be like that. Has anybody in here an idea of what could be an IT incident at the government level, for example? Yeah. The server is hacked. I heard ransomware, yeah. Malware too. Maybe phishing. Spam. Is spam an incident? Like Viagra for €5, is that an incident? Would you consider that an incident? Okay, we don't consider that as an incident because if we did, we do have around 30,000 employees at the government level, and if all of these people would send us all their spam emails for us to just randomly reply to them, say like, this is spam, we can't really do anything about it except for you not answering to those emails or clicking any links, we can't do anything about it. So what can we do though? We do have automated ways of handling incidents. We could, for example, we could prevent computers or printers from disclosing information about their toner being low. We can have antivirus softwares running on the computers of the government employees. We can also have intrusion detection, like on the web application firewall level, where you can detect SQL injections, for example. But all of these things come with cost, a lot of maintenance. You do have to run updates on them all the time. You have to keep up to date. You need to reinvent the wheel every time. And in order to distinguish new attacks to the government, we would need more sensors, for example, honeypots or sniffers on the network, but those are kind of limited. They are limited to what we teach them to do. So does anybody in here know another sensor that we could use? Maybe the users. Users are like, they are exchanging information all the time, made via email, via websites, via phishing websites. And what's good about the government is we have a lot of users. So we're kind of lucky on that level. But so now that we have distinguished the users as being a censor, we can just tell them, all of them, if you see anything, just tell it to GovCert. So what is going to happen then? They're just not going to know who to report it to. Some people might just ask you, like, what is GovCert? Or who is GovCert? What Gov what? Oh, GovSat, yeah, the space industry thing, right? So that's not the way to go. So we need a one-way street, a fault intolerant way of, like, you can't do it wrong. So looking at the entire chain of, like, from an incident happening over reporting to having it sent to GovCert so it can be completely investigated, we take the user as a weak link. We think that they don't know how to handle incidents, or that they're not technical enough to distinguish an incident from something that is actually, like, correctly or legitimate. So we always need to see all the users and all the government employees as allies. We need their help to be able to block things from happening to other employees at the government level. So weaknesses of the users are usually social engineering. That's the easiest part of getting to data, may it be at the government or at a school or a hospital that we saw earlier this morning, but also via malicious emails. So you can have emails with malicious attachments. There is a recent wave of a lot of malicious attachments going along the way, like be it at the government, private companies, the educational sector is also hit by that wave. And we need to have all the employees understand what's happening and how to report that to us. So now the user has detected something. And they're like, oh yeah, I need to report that to GovCert. I've heard about it at the CyberDay conference in Esch-Belval, but I don't really know how to do that. Like, should I call them? If I call them, what am I going to have to tell them? Because when they pick up the phone, it's like the emergency services. They're going to ask me questions. But if I'm not technical enough to understand, I might just not want to call them, because I don't want to answer questions that I do not understand. So it is tough on them. It is hard for them to understand what they need to report and how they need to report. And this is why we needed to have another look at how to make this chain a one-way direction. So the goals of the incident handling chain are always to become known or become aware to all the users, to become very accessible, very easy to use. Like, it needs to be an easy to use tool for them to contact us and to report something to us. And this is the only way that we are going to be able to investigate incidents that have not occurred just yet. So there is a tool that we've published on GitHub. It's a button. All the government employees are running Outlook, if I'm correctly aware of that. And they all got a button inside of their Outlook application that they can just hit. And once they hit it, an email containing the malicious email that they think is malicious is sent to us in the correct way. We had a lot of troubles before where when people wanted to report malicious contacts to us, they always send it in the wrong way. For example, they forwarded the email, but they forgot to add the attachment, or they forgot to forward it as attachment, because forwarding an incoming email as attachment also includes all the headers. So we can investigate from what servers did these emails come. Can we block those incoming servers so no more malicious emails hit the government? All that kind of stuff. So in order to have a consistent way of reporting all these malicious activities, we needed to develop a button for Outlook so that they can report all of that stuff to us. So next up is a slide of statistics. It might be horrific to you to see that there is a large increase of submissions. So it was in February 2018 that we launched the service. As you can see, there is a lot more submissions that hit our SOC, so the Security and Operations Center of the GovCert, starting the point of deploying the button. You can literally see a peak that was on like the first month, because people they finally had a button that allowed them to forward everything to us that they thought was malicious or suspicious or that they were annoyed about. So we had the kind of problem that everything that was annoying government employees was finally hitting our SOC. That was not the main goal of it. The main goal was to detect malicious activity and not have all the spam. So we had people forwarding us 10s, 20 emails a day, and then when we replied to them, like, we're really sorry, but we can't block or prevent spam from hitting you because it's coming from different email addresses every day. It has different links in it every day, and also it is not malicious. Even if you click on the link, it's going to have a pop-up website that is trying to sell you, I don't know, like luxury chairs. I'm not saying these are luxuries, but they might just sell something to you. So that's not malicious activity. People reply to us and say like, yeah, but if I'm annoyed by them, you can be annoyed by them too. So that's when we started to think, okay, maybe we have to change something on the button again. So the button was redeployed and now had a spam detection built in. So basically, all the spam emails, or like most of the spam emails, were already tagged with spam in the subject by the email server. So it's not completely stupid. So what the button now does is when it says spam in the subject, it asks you twice if you really want to forward that to GovCert, because they can't do anything about legitimate spam. Like, not saying legitimate spam, but spam, you know. So that really helped in getting the wave back down then. So what happened is we get a lot of reports of incidents. We also get these reports way quicker than we did before. So before the button, every government employee who saw malicious activity was supposed to report that to their technical contact of their ministry, administration, or service, and they would then forward that to us. So from the moment where we deployed the button, we were completely accessible from the end user. So any government employee can just send something to us directly without having a technical person having a look at it and maybe thinking, everybody knows this is phishing, nobody is going to click on it. So this allows us to block more content on the internet that is malicious and prevent any submission of data on the internet that would not mean to be. So the source code is online. It's on our GitHub page. If you need access to it, like, it's publicly available, but if you have any questions on it, you can come to me later and then I can teach you how to implement it for your administration. I'm not sure who is in here. So I see a lot of students. I also see some private companies, but if you have any questions about it, just come to me. So this is one way. So this is the end user side, right? So the user has now clicked the button and they have submitted an incident to GovCert. But now what? Like, are we just going to have another button for the GovCert in order to like fix the incident, right? That would be great. But in that case, nobody would need us any longer because we could be completely automated. So we came up with a kind of solution that allows us to treat incidents in a timely manner. So time is an essential factor of handling incidents for GovCert. but we also needed to not, how do you say that? We needed for operators at GovCert not to be spammed by emails. So before, we were relying on email notifications. So for example, if Chris in here, he sends me an incident, right? And then I take it, I handle the incident, but then Chris has a question. So Chris replies to that ticket. But now I skip this ticket because I think this is not important to me right now, or maybe I'm doing the presentation for CyberDay, which I was doing yesterday. So during some time frames, we have different stuff to do. We're not just waiting for incidents to happen. And before, we were always relying on email notifications. So your operating system telling you there's new email. This was not enough, because sometimes on some days you just want your email client to be off because you want to focus on something specific. Maybe you're doing a forensic investigation, so you can't be spammed by 2,000 tickets coming in because there's a lot of spam today. So we came up with this little thing. Oh, sorry. We came up with this little thing. It's a rocket. So it's not like this rocket. It's a little bit smaller. It doesn't shoot flames or stuff. I'm just going to shut it down because it's a little too light. But all of our operators at GovCert have a rocket on their table. The rocket turns purple after a certain amount of time if a ticket is still untaken. So if we have tickets that are open for too long, all the operators get a purple rocket on their table, so they all know we have incidents to handle. This is our daily business. This is the main focus of what a CERT does. If, for example, if somebody like Chris answers to a ticket, I can't ignore it, because once I have taken a ticket, it turns red, as long as the ticket is open. So if I finally fix the problem and the investigation is closed, I reply to Chris saying like, thank you for your submission. We've blocked all the contents. Nothing further can happen from here. So now the rocket goes back to black or off. And when Chris answers to the ticket, asking a question or maybe only saying thanks for handling that, my rocket turns red immediately again. So I know I have a ticket that is still open. Somebody replied to it. It is important that I act on it. So this is the reopening. We also have different types of colors for different types of investigations. So we categorize every ticket that comes into the CERT, and based on whether this is a strong incident or this is just a spam email. So you need to understand we reply to every ticket manually that comes into the CERT, and based on whether this is an investigation that has an infection or not, we categorize it differently, so that when your rocket turns back red, it means something malicious was in the ticket. If there was nothing malicious in it, it just turns orange, for example. And it has built-in monitoring. So the rocket is not like, the rocket could just stay in a red light, because, for example, the server that is controlling the colors of all the rockets that are in the offices, that might just crash, right? So they all go up and down in terms of intensity, like in every 10 seconds they change a little, so you can actually monitor if that server is still running. Because otherwise, just imagine having all the rockets off when you come in the morning, but they never turn on, or yours just doesn't switch colors when somebody replies. So it has built-in monitoring, so we always know if our systems are completely up. So this is what we call the end-to-end chain of handling incidents. So we've got the user end, where you can just easily send in an incident to GovCert, and we have the GovCert end, where we can handle an incident in a timely manner, and we can also distinguish whether or not all the elements of an incident have been handled or not, or whether there are still questions open. That's it for me.
Thank you, Thierry. Our next speaker is from BSecure, is Chris Pynchon from BSecure. And today he will speak about their new campaign about disinformation search engine optimization for fun and politics called Boris Buses, Wine Boxes, Kippers and Dead Cats. So let's give the floor to Chris Pynchon.
Morning, everybody. This is probably going to be the least technical talk of the day, and we have no pyrotechnics. It was mentioned that the new campaign of BSecure is about disinformation, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. But disinformation is a very big subject, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And there are some very strange things happening with disinformation. So today I want to talk about Boris buses, wine boxes, kippers, and dead cats. And we're looking at making a bus. Why are we looking at making a bus? So you know this guy, I'm guessing. So this is Boris, and Boris likes buses. Boris has been associated with buses since he was the mayor of London. And he was asked what he does to relax, and he said he makes buses. And he makes buses from wine boxes. Okay? And, then he puts some passengers in his buses that he's made from wine boxes. Yeah, he's when he's not doing like Brexit business and other stuff. And, he's making buses. So if you go to the internet and you look at Boris buses, you get all of this information about Boris buses. So I think what we should do is find out some more about Boris and his buses.
What do you do to relax? What do you do to switch off?
I like to paint, or I make things. I like to...
What do you make?
I have a thing where I make models of... when I was in London, well, mayor of London, we build a beautiful... I make buses.
You make models of buses?
I make models of buses.
So they're going to be in Downing Street?
So what I do... No, what I don't make models of buses, what I make is... I get old, wooden crates.
Yeah.
Right? And then I paint them. And they have two suppose it's a box that's been used to contain two wine bottles, right?
Right.
And it will have a dividing thing.
Yeah.
And I turn it into a bus, and I put passengers. You really want to know this?
You're making buses. You're making cardboard buses. That's what you do to enjoy yourself.
I paint the passengers enjoying themselves.
Okay, great.
On the wonderful bus.
Great.
So that's what Boris does. And you may be asking why Boris was in an interview talking about what he does to relax. And it was about buses. So the interesting thing is what happened on Google due to his talk about buses. Prior to him talking about buses, if you looked on the internet, anything about Boris buses, it talked about the bad reputation that the buses that he had when he was the London mayor, what had happened with those buses. They were very unpopular, etc. And it also talked about the very famous Brexit bus. The Brexit bus is the big red bus with promise that we would have millions of euros or pounds due to that. But after Boris talked about that, on the front page of Google, all of that stuff disappeared. If you went to the front page of Google, you no longer found, the majority of the stuff was no longer about bad buses and the Brexit bus. It was actually about Boris making these buses. So, what was it all about? So, tech experts, whatever they are, they say that Boris's claim about making buses was actually to manipulate the search results of Google. So the search engine optimization. You all know search engine optimization, yeah? Like how pages and things are ranked on Google and things. So this company said that they analysed what happened prior to, they looked at what, before Boris was talking about his buses, and what happened afterwards. And as they pointed out, this turned into this fact that the Google search results for Boris buses completely changed. So the company that analysed this was a company called Parallax. And they did a whole report on this information about how Boris was actually in this interview. Because if you look at him in this interview, he's not sitting and he's not looking at the guy who's interviewing him, right? He's not there sitting looking at this guy and answering these kind of questions. He's kind of like, yeah, well, buses, boxes, wine, blah, blah, blah. He's not looking, he's not talking as if he's explaining something that he frequently does. He's kind of like mumbling and not looking at the guy and not looking at the camera and looking around or whatever. But Boris is the kind of person that is actually perfect for this stuff because his reputation, the things that people imagine from this guy. People think that he's a fool, but the guy's not a fool at all. Everything he does is very carefully constructed. And it seems that he's carefully constructing, or he's using public opportunities to redefine how he is viewed over the internet. So if you go to Boris Brexit bus, you can still see the pictures of the famous bus, but even in there it's creeping in things like that the bus actually that was about his interview on the TV. So it's an interesting development of what people are doing. But Boris is quite smart and doesn't stop with buses. This is a kipper. Does anybody know what a kipper is? It's a smoked herring. And it's in the past, in Britain, it was a kind of breakfast, something you would eat for breakfast. Okay? And, it's packaged and sold and sent around. But the actual use of the term kipper we're looking for is this last one here. Kipper politics, a supporter of the UK Independence Party, a British populist political party. So UKIP, as we know them, colloquially we call members of UKIP kippers. Okay? So we're not talking about fish. So Boris, in another intervention, took out a packet of kippers on a stage and talked about how the European Union were stopping British industries from exporting their kippers, which is completely untrue. Unsurprisingly, as you can see in many of these posts here, it says, is Boris Johnson right about the rules on kippers? Boris Johnson's claim is a red herring. A red herring we use that in the UK to say that it's a trick. But if you actually just put the word kipper into Google, the first thing you find now is Boris Johnson with his holding up his kippers. Okay, and why would Boris Johnson want to be there with lots of images of him holding up bags of kippers when you go to Google? Well, it turns out that when he was the mayor of London and when he was talking about when he wanted to be prime minister and things, he actually came out with statements like this, that there was not a lot of difference between UKIP and the Tories. Okay? So as he was approaching his campaign to be prime minister, he wanted to get away from these past comments he'd made about this party, and any suggestion that he himself was a kipper, any suggestion that he supported the UKIP party. So when he went onto the stage and he held up his kippers, now when you go to Google, even if you just type in the word kipper, at least in an English version of Google, you get Boris Johnson. So he successfully removed references to him and this political party. And that's like by manipulating search engine optimization, knowing that he would get lots of hits if he's speaking in public and he's doing these stunts, he knows this will happen. But actually, his history with this kind of thing goes back a long time to when he was a journalist. And he began to talk about something called the dead cat strategy. And here's an article from 2015. Are the Tories throwing dead cats into the election debate? This question only makes sense if you recall Boris Johnson's 2013 description. So in 2013, Boris Johnson wrote an article about bankers' bonuses in the EU. To understand what has happened in the European Union in the last week, we must, I will read this out, we must borrow from the rich and fruity vocabulary of Australian political analysis. Let us suppose you are losing an argument. The facts are overwhelmingly against you, and the more people focus on the reality, the worse it is for you and your case. Your best bet in these circumstances is to perform a maneuver that a great campaigner describes as throwing a dead cat on the table, mate. This is because there is one thing that is absolutely certain about throwing a dead cat on the dining room table. And I don't mean that people will be outraged, alarmed, and disgusted. That is true, but irrelevant. The key point, says my Australian friend, is that everyone will shout, "Geez, mate, there's a dead cat on the table." In other words, they will be talking about the dead cat, the thing you want them to talk about, and they will not be talking about the issue that has been causing you so much grief. Okay, so the context of Boris Johnson's talk about the wine bottles and the Boris buses was the police had been called to the house of his partner, where he lives with his girlfriend, and there was an altercation, as they said, and loud noises and shouting. And the police had been called to this, and this was before he became Prime Minister. And of course, all of the press were very interested in this. They were interviewing the neighbours. They were appear every time he left his home. They were like, "Boris, what will you tell us about this?" And Boris refused to talk about anything to do with this thing. He just refused. He didn't say a word about it. And the next time you saw him talk about anything publicly, he was talking about making buses from wine bottles or from wine packages. And of course, all of the press immediately shifted their attention to what had happened in this altercation, what had happened that evening. And all of the press began talking about why the hell is Boris Johnson talking about wine bottles, and why is he talking about these things? Why is he talking about wine bottles and buses, etc., etc.? Okay? So he had successfully employed his own strategy, a reminder. Dead cat strategy, or dead catting, refers to the introduction of a dramatic, shocking, or sensationalist topic to divert discourse away from a more damaging topic. So we're seeing this all of the time, and of course the grand master of this is over in the White House. So I'm sure you'll remember a few months ago that this happened, the death in custody of Jeffrey Epstein. Now, interestingly, a few days after that death, so that was the 10th of August, this was announced. And the entire world went, what the fuck is he talking about? What is going on? Why is Donald Trump suddenly talking about buying Greenland? Yeah, now, we have no proof that these two things are related, but this was a few days after the death in custody of the guy who was linked to Donald Trump, who was linked in many ways to him. But in a couple of days, the press were no longer talking about that guy's suicide. All they were talking about was what happens in Greenland. So, you know, Trump is crazy like a fox in suggesting Greenland purchase, Trump land split. Historians were beginning to look at this. You know, we have no idea how this works. And of course, Trump himself is the master of fueling these things. Okay, so he tweeted this. This is a brilliant tweet. And it got 69,000 retweets. Now, I know everybody has this image of Trump sitting around in the White House eating hamburgers and tweeting like a maniac. But I'm not sure how good his Photoshop skills are, etc., etc. So I'm guessing that somebody else was doing his Photoshopping for him, putting one of his towers in Greenland. And this is a huge issue. This is a huge issue of disinformation. At the beginning of the day today, the director of RESTENA said, you know, when we think about security, when we think about what's happening, we have to think about sources of information. Where are we getting our information from and how it influences how we react and how we behave. And what's happening is that basically the entire news cycle is based around clickbait. Okay? So if a president or a prime minister wishes to change the entire debate, this was very hard in the past. It was very, very complicated to do that. With the internet, it's actually pretty easy because all it takes is a tweet or a ridiculous interview about wine bottles, etc. And by using clickbait, that turns the entire news cycle around. Okay? And so clickbait, you can see there, has been around for a long time. It's been around since 1999. You would think by now that we understood how that works. But disinformation is really, on the internet, is really, really driven by clickbait. Disinformation is produced to make clicks. The Daily Mail is a British newspaper which is hugely influential, although it actually has very few sales. And the reason it has huge impact is because it produces lots of clickbait. And what happens with that clickbait is that people that take opposing views, the Daily Mail is a right-wing newspaper, traditionally supports the Conservative Party, and people that have opposing views all tweet all of their stuff all of the time. They're outraged. They're going, this is crazy. Did you see what the Daily Mail said today? This is terrible, blah, 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 blah. And they just tweet all their stuff around. It's hugely influential. I've heard from people that worked at the BBC that in editorial meetings, they talk about their news items and they say, what will the Daily Mail say about this? And they actually edit based on that. Now, this is actually an article from 2015, and it said that the Mail was the most influential newspaper. Although, as I said, they're not a high-selling newspaper at all. But their strategy of clickbait produces that. And if you look at the sidebar here, the entire sidebar is just clickbait. Okay? The sidebar, they have a news story and then they have a bunch of clickbait taking you to links on here. And a lot of these links actually have, apart from the clickbait, they actually have links to products that you can buy them in. So, another thing that is happening that is changing the world, and now I do need the cursor. Computer-generated people. Okay, this is a site called whichfaceisreal.com, and the use of computer-generated faces and personalities is increasing. So recently, a spy was discovered on LinkedIn. Somebody who had this big profile. And the people that investigate like spies and spying activity on LinkedIn discovered that there was this person there. And they checked her background and they checked everything and they found that none of it was real. But they checked the photo and they couldn't find any record of this person anywhere in the world. This photo had never been uploaded. So they actually analyzed the photo and they discovered that the person actually wasn't real. That the photo had been generated by a computer. So, in the interests, going forward, of your ability to recognize fake people on the internet, I would like you to, with a show of hands, tell me if you think this person here is real or the other person is real. So if you believe that this person is real, please raise your hand. Let's hope that I can still find the cursor again. Okay, so if you believe this person is real, you are correct. So let's play again. Again here, so. If you believe the person on the right is, on my right is real, please raise your hand. Okay, so a lot more people believe that that person is real. You're correct. You guys are good. I did this in a school on at the beginning of the week, and the kids were going crazy because they kept getting it wrong. So, yeah, okay, that's an interesting thing. The secret is the background. Okay, so if you think the person on that side with the glasses is real, please raise your hand. Nobody thinks that person is real. Poor person. Let's see if... Okay, so, and again, I would have said that somebody said something about the background. I would have said the background in this picture doesn't look so real, etc., etc. Sorry? Yeah, exactly. So these are the kind of clues. So this is actually a site, this is I think from the University of Washington or something that developed this site, and you can go there and study this yourself later. But these are generative adversarial networks that are creating these images, okay? And these images are created on the fly. If you go to the website, it explains how they are, how everything is created. And you can, it also teaches you, it has a big section here on explaining how you can recognize how you can recognize people. So water splotches, background problems, as you pointed out. Okay, problems with the background. Glasses is a hard thing to do apparently, but in that particular instance, the glasses were correct. Other asymmetries, etc. Hair. Okay. Fluorescent bleed. So you can see that there are some ways of doing this, but if you just actually look at these pictures without investigating them, you'll probably believe that they are real, okay? They're real enough that you could believe them. And this is a very, very interesting situation as we get into trust and disinformation and things, because if you can create these photos, if you can create characters that theoretically previously have never existed, then we are in a whole new world, because your levels of trust, when you're looking at things on the internet, when you're trusting people or you're looking at this information, it becomes very, very complex when you actually have these things. The thing is that people tend to trust the information that comes from their friends. Okay, so if your friend sends you a photo, oh, I met this person, or I've seen this, or whatever, and it's a person like this, you will probably trust it because you trust your friends, you trust your information, you trust that information more than information that you're getting from Trump or Boris, for example. And that is the situation we're into now. So we've looked at other aspects of stuff today, but what we're looking at now is like social engineering, and how social engineering is really beginning to have repercussions, and the internet is getting harder and harder and harder to trust anybody and anything. And if we have a situation where world leaders are actually using their public interventions to manipulate search engine optimization and other things like that, we are now in a very, very, very difficult situation with regards to information, okay? We've heard all this stuff about fake news and these kind of things, but is what Boris did there, is that fake news? You know, maybe Boris does sit around and paint. Apparently he likes painting. Apparently he does sit around and paint, but is that fake news? It's very, very hard to say that. If you're a fact checker, how are you going to check that Boris makes his buses? Okay? How can you find out that information? How can you corroborate that information? How can you find out it's true? It's a very complicated thing. And if by doing that, all of the internet is being manipulated, if search engines are being manipulated, our access to information is being controlled in these ways. And on top of that, we can't actually trust the people we're looking to. So at the beginning, it was mentioned that the Be Secure campaign this year is actually about disinformation in all of its aspects. And the thing is that what we see mainly when disinformation is talked about in the news and in the news cycle and things is about fake news, and it's about journalism. But in reality, the whole thing of disinformation is way beyond that. It's way beyond fake news. It's way beyond all of that stuff now. It's going into these kind of fields where politicians are manipulating things. It's going into where do people get information from? Who do you trust? Instagrammers, etc., etc. So if you want further information about what Be Secure are doing about that, you can go to the website, be-secure.lu, and you'll find loads and loads of information about that. But I would just like to say, going forward, you have to be ever more suspicious, which is crap. It's not a good way to look at things. But if you're into security, if you're working in security, then that's something you should be doing anyway, analyzing sources. Can you trust where this information is coming from, etc., etc. All the things that the previous speakers have talked about. Okay.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the audience?
I have a question for you, actually. Looking at those faces, and you're saying that you can, there are some ways to detect things. Do you think, for yourselves going forwards, are you more suspicious now about things on the internet, etc., than you were like a year or so ago, as we're seeing like deep fakes, as we're seeing all of those things become more public? Is anybody, could you say, like a show of hands or something, are you more suspicious of information like now than you were, say, a year ago? Okay, so, I mean, all of these campaigns and things about that, I mean, deep fakes has come out and it's become mainstream now. My favorite thing actually is no longer deep fakes, it's cheap fakes. And cheap fakes are actually what Boris did there. It's just manipulating some information simply without any technological need, which you've got big companies and everybody looking into. Anyway, have fun out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're coming closer to the end. We will now have our last speaker, who will not speak about dead catching or fake information or something like that, but he will speak about something more, also serious, about facts and threats that can happen in information security. And he will also present you some hints how you can protect yourself. Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, so thank you for still being with us. As I'm having the honor of having the last talk of this event, I thought maybe it's good to send you out home or back to your work by just giving you some, let's say, general guidance. I mean, by now, well, typically you should already have noticed that there are things going on which need your attention, but just allow me to give you some additional examples. So you might have heard or seen in the news information about Android phones or even iPhones who deemed to be very secure getting hacked. So there was this story of China targeting Tibetans to get some information or other groups. So obviously the things of which we thought for years that they are quite secure, at least if you're not by intent breaking it, by, for example, jailbreaking your iPhone, it turns out they are not so secure. Then we did just see the presentation of Chris with the, well, not so real faces. There is also some other stuff going on, which is called deep fake of voices. So there was this example of a company where somebody in the finance department, well, seemed to have received a call from the CAO asking him to transfer some money. And I guess you did hear of stories of that, of coming in with email. But in this case, it was actually somebody being on the phone. So by now, it's possible to also fake the voice of somebody, and there are even things going on to do that also with videos, and you might have heard about that one. So, but of course, this is not only targeting companies, this is not only targeting the government, this is also happening at research and higher education. So we did hear also from Sandrine this morning about data breaches happening at higher education. I have another example here. So nevertheless, it's not only targeting companies and universities, also you as an end user might risk your own privacy. So I don't know how many of you in here are actually using Gmail services and are using a Google Calendar? A couple, huh? So have you been aware that if you click on the wrong button on your Google Calendar, you actually open your calendar to the complete world? Might not be what you want to do. Huh? So everybody then has access to all the events, all the names in your calendar. Tricky. Of course, it's not only Google. Huh? So I guess all of you did hear about the issues with Facebook. Either being related directly to Facebook or companies working with Facebook data. And another very good example, you might say, yeah, but I'm not using Facebook. You are young people, probably more on Instagram. Nevertheless, for sure, you are using a Windows computer or a Mac computer. Sad story, they are also not secure. Huh? So there has, for example, this vulnerability in Microsoft, which really dates back to Windows XP, where it was really easy for a hacker to bypass and basically use any Windows application and to get admin rights on your computer. Tricky. You can still say, yeah, come on, huh? It's far away. Well, I can tell you, we have, I think, a couple of people from the University in Luxembourg in here. And also the others still might have read that in the press. Phishing attack can also quite easily happen, and that happened, in fact, to the university at the beginning of the year. And as a result of that one, the university lost quite some money because the attacker managed to get into the accounts of some of our employees and managed to, well, trick them or trick us as university to spend some money on accounts we shouldn't have spent on. In general, Sandrine mentioned GDPR this morning already. What is the quite interesting fact is if you look at the number of data breaches which have been reported under the GDPR and you compare that to the number of people living in the country, Luxembourg has the 7th highest proportion of data breaches. Maybe that is not 100% fair because we have a lot of the frontaliers coming in. I'm not sure if they are counted into that number, then it might reduce. But nevertheless, so it's tricky. So what I would say as a result of this, clearly we are living in a quite dangerous world. And there are a couple of reasons why things can go south. Maybe you have applications which are just broken by design, fine. Maybe you have a system which is not configured in the way it should have been configured, fine. Or you have just the users making errors. Huh? So we have heard from GovCert, who has a nice way of reporting all those kind of things. So for my talk, I do not want to focus on this. I would like to focus on what actually you can do to make your life, your data a little bit more secure, and that applies to some extent to your workplace, but it also applies to your private data. Before we do this, there is one myth I need to bust. There is no such thing as perfect security, and of course you are a target. So it's just saying, why should somebody go after me? That will not work. And the other thing is, if you have a really skilled attacker who wants to have your data, I can assure you he will get it. No way around this. So clearly the question is not if you will be affected by a data breach, by a security incident. The question is only when it will happen and to which extent. Will it affect your private data? Will it affect your company data? I don't know. It will happen. Nevertheless, don't panic. There are at least a couple of things you can do. So if you look at the attacks going on, basically it's quite obvious that most of the attacks are not that highly targeted, as I was saying before. but typically the attackers try to reach out to as many people as possible. And if you take some basic protection measures, you can make your digital data, your digital home more secure. And I will spend the rest of the talk by just explaining you a couple of things you could do. For that, what I would like to use is an analogy. So how can you secure your digital home? Well, basically, you should protect your digital identity, your digital data, the same way you would protect the objects of value you have in your real life. So, for example, the things you have in your home, in your flat, in your house. If you use that analogy, you can think about the network as the floors which connect the rooms in your digital home. And then the data you would like to protect can be easily thought as objects being in these rooms. And then, of course, depending on the sensitivity of the data, you will be able to choose between different protection measures to secure this. So you could have a very cheap lock, you could have a very expensive lock, you could have a fingerprint sensor on it. It really depends on how valuable or how sensitive the information is you want to protect. And just on a side note, of course, not all the data you want to protect will be in your house, under your control. Of course, you will also have data which is stored somewhere else. So the first question you should ask yourself then, of course, is if we are thinking about your house, will you really leave your door or your window open all the time? Well, an open door is an invitation for everybody to come in and just look around, invite your privacy. And even if you just have a window open and no curtain in front of it, well, everybody can come in and can spy on you. And similar, an unsecured or a badly secured IT system allows, of course, everyone, all strangers, all over the world to try to check out or get your private data. And when we are talking about your house, well, at least somebody needs to be in your street and passed through your house. We're talking about the internet. You all know that there's a lot of more people who are checking on that. So what you should do, you should close your doors, and with that, try to reduce or even stop the invasion of your privacy. If we are talking about doors, well, for each door, you should have a good key. And like a key, if we are going back to the digital world, basically the password opens the door to access your data. So what you should have, and we did hear that before in the talks, you should use strong passwords, because those are really like good locks and solid keys. They might be more expensive, but they're also more secure. More expensive basically means, well, you should not use something like password as your password or 1234. You should choose something which is a little bit more complex. Obviously, if you have complex passwords, you need to somehow remember them. And well, if you think about the keys, you don't have a lot of individual keys in your pocket. You have them combined into a key ring. And the key ring of the digital world, you can think of the password manager. The benefit of using a password manager is not only that it organizes your passwords, but it also helps you getting strong passwords. One important thing also is think about the difference between using a single sign-on service if available, so things like using your Facebook login or your Google login to access different services, or using the same password for different services. What is the difference? Somebody knows? Well, if you use the same password and it's compromised, you need to change it on all the systems. Whereas if you have a single sign-on where you have one identity, think about that as one door and you have then floors going to the different areas. Obviously, if you change the lock to this one door, if you change the password to the one door, all the other systems are also, it's also changed for all the other systems. Still, one other recommendation is if you use an identity and this identity allows you to use multi-factor authentication, you should do that as well. Important in that one is also to choose a good additional factor. So you could, for example, use an app on your smartphone. That would be quite good. SMS is not really the best thing as a second factor. It's better than nothing, but not really so good. And of course, if you can use biometric authentication like your iris scan or a fingerprint, that is also quite good. So by now, we have hopefully secured the door. But what is also important, and you know that if you're living in a flat, if you're living in a house, you need to do regular maintenance. If you do nothing on your home, after a certain time, things will break, will no longer work. And the same goes for your computer system. So you should, of course, install updates on a regular basis. And not just ignore prompts which are asking you to do so. Similar, if you see in your house that something is not working the way you expect it to work, you will not just ignore it, because then things will get worse. You fix it, and you should do the same on your computer. If you receive, for example, a warning message that your Windows Defender did not update the database for a couple of days, please try to check for that and make it actually update. Nevertheless, you should have your defenses ready. If we think about a house, well, maybe you have a fence around your house, and that is already a first obstacle for strangers, a first border around your grounds, which might stop people from coming in. And you should do the same for your personal data. So if you are using your own computer, make sure that the firewall is actually active. You should install an antivirus or anti-malware program, keep them up to date, so that actually this is somehow like a guard at the entrance of your place, checking what is coming in and stopping bad or suspicious visitors. The other important thing is to use software from trusted sources. So I know sometimes software can be expensive, but nevertheless, you should not use any hacked or cracked software, because quite often this type of software includes some special gifts you do not want to have on your computer. If you say, okay, I don't want to pay for software, I don't have the money to do so, maybe check out freeware. If you, I don't know, want to do some things with images and you say, okay, I don't want to use Photoshop, maybe try GIMP. If you don't want to spend money on Microsoft Office, try OpenOffice. So there are quite often very good alternatives you can use without spending money, but this is a lot better than just going to a torrent website and downloading a copy of that software from an unknown source. What you should, of course, also do is you should plan for disaster recovery. If you think about your house, it might be robbed, it might be damaged, it could be destroyed by flood or fire or any natural disaster. And in a similar way, your device might be lost, stolen, you might drop it, it might be destroyed, or for whatever reason stop working. So to prevent that you are running into an issue with that one, you should think about which data you actually have, which of this data is maybe already backed up, and which of this data is so important that you cannot lose it. Then what is important still is mind the gap between using cloud storage, so for example Dropbox, using a local NAS and doing backup. A NAS, for example, or an external drive in general, does not protect you from a failure and losing data by that. Then you really need a backup strategy. And again, there are plenty of tools available to do so. If you're using a Mac, you have with Time Machine already a quite nice built-in tool. If you're using an iPhone and you're signing up for the iCloud, it can automatically back up all your data to that one. You can use also tools like, I don't know, OwnCloud or something like that as your own cloud services if you don't trust those services. The important thing is really to think about which data is important for you and to make sure that you do not lose it. What is gone is gone. then there is still, we did see that, the risk of data breaches, of a break-in, of a theft. And again, you should be prepared to protect your data. As I was saying before, it's not a question if something will happen, the question is when will it happen? And to prepare yourself and to protect your data, think about encryption. So again, there are powerful tools available. If you're using Windows, BitLocker shops with is directly included. You can use that to protect the data on your hard drive, but you can also use it to protect data on external drives. The same thing goes for File Vault on macOS. If you have an iPhone, luckily, as soon as you enable the PIN code on your iPhone, it automatically encrypts the device. You can do something similar for Android. And if you do that, at least in case you lose your device or it's stolen, you can at least be sure that your data is secure. If that happens, try to wipe and lock your stolen devices. So on an iPhone or on an Apple device, that's quite easy. You can just go to the Apple website or use an app to do so. You can do something similar if you're, for example, using Office 365. If you had some sort of malware on your computer, it's important, or at least you should consider changing your locks, changing your passwords. And of course, after such an incident, you should monitor your data a little bit more closely, maybe also your bank account and your credit card statements. So hopefully now your house is somehow secured, but well, we are social people, so we have our social media guys in the room. And you should still think, what about your interaction with other people? And what many people still use is email. And as was said before, email is also not considered to be a secure system. And the same way you could put a name of any sender on an envelope you bring to the post, it's possible to define whatever sender address in an email. And well, for that reason and for many others, emails are still the most common attack vector. We did hear from GovCert that they also have a lot of strange emails coming in, and they introduced this nice button to report this kind of things. So in general, that's what also they ask their people: be suspicious when you receive an email from an unknown sender, and try to verify the identity of the sender, and also try to avoid clicking on links in email if you don't expect them. Of course, if you sign up for a newsletter, if you sign up with a new service and they tell you that they will send you an email, well, sure, you can click on the link on that. But if you just receive an email like that, tricky. If you are convinced that you will not fall for a fish, I would invite you to go to some sites which are freely available on the internet and just test your skills on how good you actually are with this. Next part, social media. Again, the same question. Think about your house, think about your flat. If you are going on holidays, would you actually put a sign into your window saying, oh, bye-bye, I will be back in 3 weeks, I'm in Egypt or wherever you go to holidays? Probably not. So would you share whatever your intimate thoughts to somebody you just met on the road? And also be aware the internet never forgets. I mean, you can delete posts or tweets, but you can be sure somebody did copy them. So whatever you put out there, think about what you put and think about with whom you share. So also be secure. Chris is gone, I think. We had also a very nice campaign about this, I think it was last year, remember correctly? So the material should be still available on their website. Final thought about that one. Well, if it's too good to be true, most likely it's not. If you receive an email or an SMS or whatever saying, hey, congratulations, you won a free iPhone, just click here, it's not so likely that this is true. So, and again, Just imagine you have somebody ringing on your door saying, oh, congratulations, you won a trip to Bermuda. Would you really believe this person? Probably not. Huh? So nothing is for free, and the least you will pay with your personal data, which can then be abused for other attacks. So at the end, I would leave you with 2 slides. I think I'm very fast. With 2 slides with a quick action plan. Step 1, go to this nice website, haveabeenpwned.com, enter your email address and see if it is listed in this. This is a site which collects information from a lot of data breaches, from a lot of databases collecting hacked passwords. And just see if your password is listed in there. If so, think about changing it. It will list you not only it is in, it will also tell you on which site. And then again, if you did use the same password on multiple sites, think about changing it on all of them. A second big step, really think about start using a password manager so that you have strong and unique passwords for each service you use. Again, there are plenty of free tools, or free and also paid tools. So there could be KeePass, there could be Last Lane, 1Password, whatever you want to choose. See what fits your needs in terms of which phone you use, which computer you use, and choose something which is worth for you, and also enable multi-factor authentication. And then part 2, very easy. There is a nice website which is called www.securityplanner.org. It's a website hosted, I think, in Canada. And you can just go there. You can say, what is important to me? I want to protect my social media life. I want to protect my emails, whatever. It will ask you 4 or 5 easy questions to answer, and then it will come up with some sort of recommendations what to do. My final slide. This is a very nice video I just wanted to show you. It just takes 90 minutes.
I just clicked on it because I was curious. I wanted to see where the link would take me. He sounded so friendly, so I gave him my credit card number. Said choose my boss's boss's boss. What was I supposed to do? Do you know how many emails I get? Do you want me to check all the details? I need to serve clients cybersecurity. That's not my job. I can't believe I won a trip to Mexico. I never win anything. I share my password with my mom, dad, sister, and my friend named Daniel. That way I don't need to remember it. What's cybersecurity have to do with banking? I don't get paid enough to be a cyber expert.
Do any of these excuses sound like something you'd say? Don't worry if the answer's yes, you're not alone. It's easy to get caught off guard with the information coming from multiple sources and increasing the chances of falling victim to a cyber threat. We need to be mindful of the consequences of everything we do. Learn how to protect ourselves from fraudsters and hackers and be cyber aware. Remember, cybersecurity isn't child's play.
Thank you all. I would like to thank all our partners that made it possible to have this conference today. So Be Secure, GovCert, Circle, Security Made in DALU, University of Luxembourg, and the RESTENA Foundation. And I would like also to do some announcement. On the 28th of January 2020, we have another conference about privacy. So it's about sensitive data and related topics. And also GDPR will be presented and so on. This will be in collaboration also with the University of Luxembourg, RESTENA Foundation, and other partners such as the CNPD. And to the 28th of January 2020. And for those who need a certificate of attendance, they can pick it up at the registration desk in front of the door. And for concluding, thanks for being here today. A great applause to yourself, please. And I hope to see you again next year on the CyberDay conference. Thank you. Bye-bye.